Welcome back to Traore Command. Welcome back to the family. Whether this is your first time here or you have been with us since day one, I want you to know something. This channel exists because of you. Every view, every comment, every share. You are the reason Traore's story reaches millions. And today, I have a story that is going to make you proud. Genuinely, deeply proud. Not proud of a politician, not proud of a government, proud of Africa. Proud of your culture, proud of the fabric your grandmother wove with her own hands. Before I begin, I need to ask you something. If you are African, if African blood runs through your veins, if you have ever worn a piece of cloth that was made by someone in your family, in your village, in your community, hit that like button. Not for me, for them. For every weaver, every tailor, every seamstress, every dyer who was told that their work was not good enough, that their fabric was too cheap, that the world did not want what Africa makes. Like this video for them, because what I am about to tell you proves that the entire world was wrong, and one man knew it all along. And please, stay until the very end, because in the final minutes of this video, I will share something about Traore's vision for 2026 that has not been covered anywhere else. Something that will change how you see the future of this continent. Do not leave. Trust me on this one. Let us go back. Not to last year, not to 2022. Let us go back to 1986. The year is 1986. A young military captain stands before the people of Burkina Faso. He is 36 years old. He has been president for 3 years. His name is Thomas Sankara, and he is wearing something unusual. Not a European suit, not a French tailored jacket, not an imported silk tie. He is wearing Faso Danfani, the cloth of the homeland, a fabric woven by hand, from cotton grown in Burkinabe soil, dyed with natural pigments, and stitched together by Burkinabe artisans using techniques passed down for generations. Sankara looks at his people and says 5 words that will echo through 4 decades of African history. Let us consume what we produce. 5 words. Simple words, but words that carried the weight of an entire revolution. Because Sankara was not just talking about fashion, he was talking about the soul of a nation. He was saying that a country that does not value what it creates will never be free. That a people who wear someone else's clothes will eventually think someone else's thoughts. That fabric is not just fabric. Fabric is identity. Sankara declared Faso Danfani a national cultural heritage. He urged every Burkinabe, from government officials to school children, to wear locally made cloth. He wanted Burkina Faso to grow its own cotton, spin its own thread, weave its own fabric, and dress its own people. No imports, no dependency, no European hand-me-downs. And the West watched this young African captain with growing alarm, not because of what he wore, but because of what it meant. If Burkina Faso stopped importing European textiles, European companies would lose a market. If other African countries followed, the losses would be catastrophic. The entire model of selling finished goods to Africa while buying raw materials for pennies would collapse. On October 15, 1987, Thomas Sankara was assassinated. Shot multiple times in a coup orchestrated by his own colleague, Blaise Compaoré. Sankara was 37 years old, the same age Captain Ibrahim Traoré is right now. The revolution died. The fabric went back to the margins. The imports came flooding back. And for almost 4 decades, Burkina Faso, one of Africa's largest cotton producers, continued the absurd cycle that Sankara had tried to break, growing cotton, exporting it raw to Europe, and then buying it back as finished clothing at 10 times the price. Let me make sure you understand this. Burkina Faso grows some of the finest cotton on earth. It is one of the largest cotton producers on the entire African continent. The soil, the climate, the expertise, everything is there. And yet, for decades, Burkinabe families were wearing second-hand t-shirts from America instead of clothes made from their own cotton. American charity bins were emptied, shipped to West Africa, and sold in local markets. These mountains of used clothing destroyed local tailors, destroyed local weavers, destroyed entire communities of artisans whose families had been making cloth for centuries. Think about what that does to a people. You grow the cotton. Someone else turns it into a shirt. Someone in America wears that shirt for 2 years. They throw it away. It gets shipped back to your country. And your mother buys it in the market. Your own cotton, processed abroad, worn by a stranger, discarded, and sold back to you. That is not trade. That is humiliation designed as commerce. And the weavers? The women who spent their lives at the loom? They had no customers. Nobody wanted Faso Danfani when you could buy a used Nike t-shirt for less. The looms gathered dust. The skills stopped being passed down. A generation of young people grew up thinking that African cloth was old-fashioned, backward, something your grandmother wore but you would never touch. The fabric that speaks. That is what Faso Danfani means. The cloth that speaks. Every pattern tells a story. Every stripe has a meaning. Every color represents something. Joy, mourning, marriage, harvest, war, peace. This was not just clothing. This was a library woven in thread. And it was dying. Until Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Traoré came to power in September 2022. And from his very first days, he understood something that most leaders never grasp. He understood that sovereignty is not just about kicking out foreign troops or nationalizing gold mines. Sovereignty starts with what you put on your body every morning. If you wake up and dress in clothes made by someone who does not know your name, in a country that has never respected your dignity, you begin your day as a consumer of someone else's identity. And Traoré refused. He banned the import of secondhand clothing from the United States. When he announced this, the reaction was immediate. Western media called it reckless. Economic analysts said it would hurt the poorest citizens who depended on cheap imported clothes. Social media was full of mockery. Who does this captain think he is? Banning American t-shirts? What will people wear? Traoré had an answer. A simple answer. An answer that Sankara had given 40 years earlier. They will wear what they make. And then Traoré went further than Sankara ever could. Because Sankara had the dream but ran out of time. Traoré had the dream and built the infrastructure to make it real. First, he mandated that all school uniforms in Burkina Faso would be made from Faso Danfani. Think about that. Millions of school children, every single one of them wearing locally woven cloth. Every morning, when a child puts on their uniform, they are wearing their own culture, their own history, their own identity. And every uniform creates demand. Demand for cotton growers, demand for spinners, demand for dyers, demand for weavers, demand for tailors. An entire economic ecosystem activated by one policy decision. Then he went after the courts. For decades, Burkinabe lawyers and judges wore European-style robes and powdered wigs. Powdered wigs. In West Africa, in the Sahel heat. Because the French colonial system said that is what civilized justice looks like. Traoré said no more. Judges now wear locally produced garments. The wigs are gone. The robes are gone. Burkina Faso's courts look like Burkina Faso, not like a bad copy of 18th century Paris. Then the military. Burkina Faso stopped importing police and military uniforms. A local production facility was established to manufacture all uniforms domestically. Every soldier, every police officer, every gendarme now wears a uniform made in Burkina Faso, by Burkinabe workers, from Burkinabe materials. The money that used to flow to foreign uniform suppliers now stays in the country, creates jobs, builds skills, feeds families. And something beautiful started happening. The looms came back to life. In Koudougou, the Faso Fani textile mill, a factory that had been dormant for decades, started humming again. In Ouagadougou and Bobo Dioulasso, cotton processing plants opened. Artisan cooperatives that were on the verge of extinction suddenly had orders. Women who had given up weaving picked up their threads again. Young people who had never touched a loom began learning from their grandmothers. This is what Traoré does that nobody else does. He does not just make policy, he resurrects culture. He takes something that was dying and breathes life back into it. And he does it not with speeches or slogans, but with concrete decisions that create concrete demand that produces concrete results. But here is where the story takes a turn that nobody, absolutely nobody could have predicted. Now, I need you to pay very close attention, because what I am about to tell you is the reason I made this video today. The reason I asked you to stay until the end. The reason I said you would feel proud. FIFA, the organization that runs world football, the biggest sporting body on earth, the institution that organizes the most watched event in human history, has just announced something extraordinary. For the 2026 World Cup, which will be held in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, FIFA has selected 5 African countries to produce official tournament jerseys under a program called Made in West Africa. The 5 countries are Benin, Mali, Burkina Faso, Chad, and Côte d'Ivoire. Burkina Faso, the country that the world laughed at for banning American t-shirts, the country that Western analysts said was being reckless, the country led by a 37-year-old captain who earns a captain's salary. That country has just been selected to produce jerseys for the biggest sporting event on the planet. I need you to understand the magnitude of this. The World Cup is watched by billions of people. Billions. The jerseys worn during the World Cup are among the most purchased sports merchandise on Earth. And now, some of those jerseys will be sewn from African cotton, by African hands, in African factories. In Burkina Faso, in the land of the upright people, in the country of Faso Danfani, in Captain Ibrahim Traoré's Burkina Faso. Do you understand what Traoré has done? He did not lobby FIFA. He did not beg for a contract. He built a textile industry. He created demand for local production. He established factories. He trained workers. He proved that Africa can manufacture world-class products. And FIFA came to him. This is the difference between Traoré and every other leader who talks about African industrialization. Others write policy papers. Traoré builds factories. Others attend conferences. Traoré trains weavers. Others make promises. Traoré delivers jerseys. And this is not just about football. This FIFA contract could be the beginning of something that transforms the entire West African textile sector. Because the 5 countries selected, Benin, Mali, Burkina Faso, Chad, and Côte d'Ivoire, are the C4+1 group, the largest cotton producers in Africa. Together, they produce hundreds of thousands of tons of cotton every year, and for decades, almost all of that cotton was exported raw. Think about what happens if the Made in West Africa program succeeds. If the World Cup jerseys are high quality, if they are delivered on time, if the world sees that Africa can manufacture at global standards, the door opens, not just for football jerseys, for all textile production, uniforms, workwear, fashion, export markets that were never available before, billions of dollars in value that used to leave the continent staying in African hands. And it all started with a young captain who looked at a used t-shirt from America and said, "No more." Now, let me tell you about Faso Danfani itself, because this fabric deserves its own moment. It deserves to be known by every person watching this video. Faso Danfani translates to the cloth of the homeland. But there is another translation that is even more beautiful, the cloth that speaks, because every piece of Faso Danfani tells a story. The patterns are not decorative, they are linguistic. A specific stripe combination might represent a proverb. A particular color arrangement might mark a ceremony. The width of the bands might indicate the weaver's village, their family, their clan. The fabric is made from locally grown cotton. Traditionally, the cotton is gathered, spun, and dyed by women. The dyeing uses natural materials: leaves, bark, mud, indigo. Each color takes hours, sometimes days, to achieve. Then the dyed thread goes to the loom. The weaving is done on traditional horizontal looms, producing strips of cloth about 15 to 30 centimeters wide. These narrow strips are then sewn together to create larger pieces of fabric. Every piece is unique. Every piece carries the signature of its maker. This is not mass production. This is art. Living, breathing, wearable art that connects the person wearing it to the hands that made it, the soil that grew the cotton, and the centuries of knowledge encoded in every thread. And here is something that most people do not know. Faso Danfani is not cheap fabric for local markets. Luxury fashion houses already know about it. Brands like Loewe and Camper have used Faso Danfani in their collections. International designers seek out this fabric because of its quality, its texture, its authenticity. The Ethical Fashion Initiative, supported by the European Union, has invested in training and equipment for Burkinabe weavers, specifically because the global luxury market wants what they make. So when someone tells you that Africa cannot manufacture high-quality products, tell them about Faso Danfani. Tell them that Burkinabe weavers have been producing world-class textiles for centuries before Europe even had a textile industry. Tell them that African quality was never the problem. The problem was a system designed to keep Africa as a raw material supplier and never a manufacturer. Traoré is dismantling that system, thread by thread, loom by loom, factory by factory. And it is not just textiles. This is part of a much larger industrial revolution happening in Burkina Faso right now. Near Bobo Dioulasso, Traoré laid the foundation for a cashew apple processing factory worth 6.65 billion CFA francs. Once complete, it will process 5,000 tons of cashew annually into juice, vinegar, ethanol, and other products, creating over 1,000 jobs. A tomato processing plant has been inaugurated in Pognongo with a capacity of 5 tons per hour. Cotton processing plants are opening across the country. Traoré is not building one factory. He is building an industrial base, a foundation that will sustain Burkina Faso's economy for generations. Every factory creates jobs. Every job creates a family that can afford to eat, to educate their children, to build a house. Every house builds a neighborhood. Every neighborhood builds a city. Every city builds a nation. This is what the West calls reckless: building factories, training workers, manufacturing products, feeding people. This is what they say will fail. Meanwhile, the countries that follow Western advice are still exporting raw cotton and importing finished t-shirts. Tell me who is reckless. Now here is what I promised you at the beginning, the part that has not been widely covered, the bigger vision. Traoré is not just building factories for Burkina Faso. He is building a regional manufacturing hub for the entire alliance of Sahel states. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger together produce massive quantities of cotton, gold, uranium, manganese, and agricultural products. Traoré's vision is to process all of these resources domestically and regionally. Not export them raw, process them. Add value, create products, sell finished goods. The 332-kilometer highway from Ouagadougou to Bobo Dioulasso, the one Traoré is building with his own money, is not just a road. It is an industrial corridor. It connects the capital to the manufacturing centers. It connects factories to ports in neighboring countries. It connects Burkina Faso to global markets. The $895 million AES Investment Bank is not just a bank. It is the financing mechanism for this industrial revolution. The money to build factories, train workers, and purchase equipment will come from African-owned institutions, not from the World Bank with its conditions and its approved contractor lists. And now, the FIFA contract adds another dimension: international credibility. If Burkina Faso can produce jerseys for the World Cup, it can produce anything. The Made in West Africa brand becomes a stamp of quality recognized by billions of football fans worldwide. That brand opens doors that no amount of diplomacy or lobbying could open. Traoré is connecting all the pieces. Gold revenues fund infrastructure. Infrastructure connects factories. Factories produce goods. Goods build brands. Brands open markets. Markets create wealth. Wealth stays in Africa. This is not a policy. This is architecture. The architecture of a free continent. And the architect is a 37-year-old captain from a village called Kara who earns a captain's salary and has survived 5 assassination attempts. In 1986, Thomas Sankara stood before his people wearing Faso Danfani and said, "Let us consume what we produce." They killed him for that dream. For 37 years, that dream lay dormant. The looms gathered dust. The weavers lost hope. The fabric that speaks went silent. And then Ibrahim Traoré picked up the thread. He did not just revive the dream. He industrialized it. He scaled it. He turned a cultural symbol into an economic engine. He took what Sankara whispered and made the whole world hear it. And now, FIFA is listening. Luxury brands are listening. The world is listening. Because you cannot ignore a country that banned your secondhand clothes and started making World Cup jerseys instead. If your grandmother ever sat at a loom, if your mother ever sewed your clothes by hand, if your aunt ever dyed fabric in the backyard using leaves and bark and mud, share this video with her. Tell her that what she does matters. Tell her that the world is finally catching up to what she always knew. Tell her that a young captain in Burkina Faso is making sure her craft never dies. And tell her that the cloth that speaks is speaking again, louder than ever. I want to leave you with one final thought, because I think it matters. There is a generation of African children who are growing up right now in Burkina Faso wearing Faso Danfani school uniforms. These children do not know what a second-hand American t-shirt looks like. They have never worn one. Their first uniform, the first official garment they ever put on their body, was made in their own country, from their own cotton, by their own people. That might seem like a small thing, a school uniform, but it is not small. It is the biggest thing in the world, because those children are growing up with something that their parents and grandparents never had. They are growing up believing that what Africa makes is good enough, that what their country produces is worthy, that their culture is not something to be ashamed of, but something to be celebrated. When those children grow up, they will not accept secondhand anything. Not secondhand clothes, not secondhand policies, not secondhand sovereignty. They will demand the real thing. Because from their very first day of school, they wore the real thing. That is Traoré's greatest achievement. Not the gold mines, not the military victories, not the diplomatic coups. His greatest achievement is a generation of children who know what it feels like to wear their own identity. And that generation will change Africa forever. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the man who picked up the thread that Sankara dropped, the man who turned a banned t-shirt into a World Cup jersey, the man who proved that the cloth that speaks has the most powerful voice in the room. Sankara dreamed it. They killed him. Traoré built it, and they cannot stop him. From Traoré Command, with love and pride. Until next time.